Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, as I always say, wherever you're based. Welcome to CAMNES Studio. So, it has been a while since we haven't been doing something live. We have been quite active on our channel, on our YouTube channel. In fact, I want to take the opportunity to invite you to try to explore a little bit of the channel because we did a lot of contents in the last years. So, this is our new lecture, finally a live one. It's important, the interaction part. Please try to interact. Try to post any type of question, of comment. Obviously, you have to do this on the YouTube channel. You're going to find a little section on the right, the chat. You have to access with your Google account. At that point, you can write wherever you want. And at the end of the video, I'm going to try to post these questions to Valentina. Okay, I already gave away the name of the lecture, so let's proceed. Today we're going to take a look, we're going to hear a lecture on ancient Egypt, and more specifically on Tutankhamun. I have our guest today is Valentina Santini. She is an Egyptologist and communication expert here at CAMNES, and she is presenting a lecture entitled Tutankhamun, the Boy Beyond the Myth. Thank you, Valentina.
Thank you so much, Guido. Hello, everyone. And now I'm trying to share my screen so that you all can see my presentation. Okay, here it is. Thank you so much, Guido. Thank you for this opportunity. And I would like to thank you and also Stefano, the co-directors of CAMNES, for giving me the opportunity of giving this lecture. A lecture, as Guido said, focused on Tutankhamun. And as you all know, this year we celebrate 100 years from the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun. And so this is one of the many lectures that scholars all over the world dedicated to Tutankhamun. But in this case, I would like to focus a bit more on the human side, on the human face of Tutankhamun. Because, as you all know, Tutankhamun is a myth, is a proper legend, a celebrity. And especially for the wider public, if you ask someone to think about a symbol of the entire ancient Egyptian civilization, they probably will answer the pyramids or the golden mask of Tutankhamun. So Tutankhamun, and especially the mask that was found on the body of the young pharaoh, had become a proper symbol of the entire Egyptian culture, ancient Egyptian culture. So it became a proper myth because of the discovery of his tomb. According to the evidence, according to what we know, which is not so much, unfortunately, while Tutankhamun was alive, he probably didn't accomplish many things. He was quite young when he ascended the throne, as you all know. He was approximately 9-10 years old. And then he ruled Egypt for approximately a decade. So he wasn't able to do big stuff, to construct, to organize, to do something memorable. At least that is what we know according to evidence. There's the big issue, that's the damnatio memoriae that was casted against him and against the other pharaohs of the Amarna period. So, of course, we don't know many things concerning Tutankhamun's life, concerning his reign. And consequently, we cannot be sure about what he actually did while he was alive. But we know for sure that the discovery of his tomb was the thing that made him famous, that transformed Tutankhamun into a proper celebrity. This discovery that, as I said, happened a century ago, exactly 100 years ago, was the thing that, for instance, created the Tutmania. So there's a sort of Egyptomania, but focused on Tutankhamun rather than on the ancient Egyptian civilization in general. And another characteristic that is usually associated to Tutankhamun, especially for the wider public, is the course of Tutankhamun. Even before the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, the course of the mummy already existed. But because of the discovery of this tomb, the course of the mummy became the course of Tutankhamun. So it was possible to give an identity to that specific mummy, the mummy that wanted vengeance because someone wake him up after his long sleep to the afterlife. And of course, the death of Lord Carnarvon was the very first that was considered as part of this course. So Tutankhamun became a myth because of the Tutmania, as I said, because of the course, and even nowadays we talk about these aspects of Tutankhamun. As I mentioned, of course, these things are especially true for the wider public. But Tutankhamun is a myth for everyone. Is known not only among the Egyptologists, not only among the scholars, but also among common people, people who maybe are curious about ancient Egypt, maybe people who are passionate, but also people who don't have any kind of relationship with ancient Egypt. Everyone knows Tutankhamun. But I would like, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this lecture, I would like to focus a bit more on his human side, on his human face. Because Tutankhamun, before being a legend, before being a celebrity, was, of course, a boy, was a young man, was a pharaoh, was a member of a family. And I've decided to add this picture of the 3D reconstruction of the body of Tutankhamun to underline, to mark this aspect. So the fact that Tutankhamun was extremely human. While he was alive, he had so many issues, so many health issues. He had problems with his feet, with his back, and in fact, he was forced to use a staff to walk, to move. He had many, many problems related to his body, to his physical appearance, to his health conditions. Also, because his parents were brother and sister. And we know that because of the many analyses, many studies that have been conducted on the body of Tutankhamun. For instance, probably the most famous and most important one is the one published in 2010 by Awas et al. And all these analyses, all these studies are fundamental because they help us understand that Tutankhamun was not only a legend, is not only a legend, but it was more. It was a boy. It was a true person, a proper person. And so my question, the question that is behind the slides that we are going to see in a minute, is would it be possible, could it be possible to, looking at the objects found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, try and somehow visualized and identify this human side of Tutankhamun? Is it possible, by looking at some of the objects in the funerary equipment of Tutankhamun, have a picture in mind of Tutankhamun, but the boy Tutankhamun, and not the mythological figure, the celebrity Tutankhamun? So we'll see. I would like to start this list of objects in my opinion,
Provi a
related
accendere l'audio e
to
senti se c'è un fischietto
a
ogni
possible
tanto,
picture
giusto per capire
of
se so io
the
qui.
human side, the human face of Tutankhamun
Eh?
from this amazing object. This picture
No, un
has
attimo,
been
10
taken by
secondi, poi lo
Paolo
spegni.
Bondielli in 2019 exhibition in Paris. And this object, as you can see, is a detail of the entire object. Is a flabellum, a fan, which is composed by different parts, a quite tall, a quite long handle, and this upper part, a sort of semicircle, a sort of palm decorated in the upper part of the object. And I decided to add this picture because in that exhibition, they decided to reconstruct also the part all around the palm, all around the upper part of the object, so that you can see how the feathers of the flabellum were attached to the object itself. I've added also a zoom in of the scene decorated in this part of the object. Actually, both sides of the objects are decorated, so that you can see that in this scene, there's Tutankhamun, who is represented while hunting. He's on his chariot and he's hunting ostriches. You can see a couple of ostriches in the right part of the scene.
Qui è perfetto.
And it is not accidental. This choice is not accidental because the feathers that we saw before that were attached to the handle were ostrich feathers. And therefore, this scene represents Tutankhamun while he was hunting those ostriches whose feathers were used to realize the flabellum. And we know that because of the inscription that is written on the handle, where it is clearly visible that the ostriches, that the feathers of the flabellum has been obtained by the king during one of his hunts in the desert area around Heliopolis. I would like to add just a teeny tiny detail that I love of this scene. If you look behind the chariot, you can see there's an Ankh sign, which is represented with legs and arms, and which is holding a flabellum, exactly the one where the scene is carved, where the scene is represented. On the other side of the same object, there's another scene decorated, and Tutankhamun is represented while coming back home after the hunt. So both scenes are related with the object itself. Why did I choose this object? For two main aspects, which of course are related. The first one is thanks to the inscription, thanks to this image, this scene, it is possible to picture, to imagine Tutankhamun while hunting. At that time, you all know that hunt was an activity related to sport, a way to underline the importance, the power of a pharaoh. But the other very important detail that I would like to underline, and the reason why I choose this object, is visible in this photo taken by Barton. And you can see that all over the palm, all over the upper part of the fan, there are some fragments of the original ostrich feathers that were attached to the object. And in fact, when Carter found this object, the feathers were partially still visible. Unfortunately, insects devoured the rest of the feathers, but apart, some fragments were still visible and were still attached to the flabellum. And thanks to these fragments, it was possible to determine that the feathers were placed in an alternate way, dark and white. So it's quite amazing to think about this object, because thanks to this finding, you can picture not only Tutankhamun while hunting, but also while he is surrounded by his court, with people holding the flabellum, and you can imagine also the colors of the feathers while Tutankhamun was alive. So these very first images that I'm going to show you are all related to a specific aspect of the human side of Tutankhamun. They are all related to the pharaoh Tutankhamun, so his life at court. These other objects are extremely fascinating, in my opinion. As you can see, it's a pair of earrings. They represent a bird, the body of a bird, which can be considered a duck, as you can see by the head represented in these earrings. But according to other scholars, the body of the bird could actually belong to a hawk, so that the image is actually a duck-headed hawk. And we will see in another object in a few slides, an object quite similar to this one, where the bird is obviously a hawk. So it is possible that only the head of the duck actually belongs to a duck, whereas the rest of the body, it's a link to the hawk, and therefore the role of royalty and the relation with Horus, and the fact that the pharaoh was a god on earth. These earrings are extremely important because they present traces of use, which means that they were used at a certain time, especially in the upper part, where there's a sort of a screw in the upper part of the objects. There, they present traces of friction. So the question is, do these earrings, were these earrings actually used by Tutankhamun? We don't know for sure, because there are many issues concerning the possibility that Tutankhamun actually wore earrings. Let's start from analyzing the golden mask of Tutankhamun. Here, as you can see, Tutankhamun is represented with his ears pierced, which means that at a certain time, Tutankhamun could have been used those earrings. However, we must underline two main facts concerning this wonderful masterpiece. First of all, the mask of Tutankhamun probably was not intended for Tutankhamun at its origin. And in fact, a series of studies and analysis, and I'm thinking, for instance, of the study of Reeves published in 2015, prove that in the textual part of the mask, the name of Tutankhamun presents signs of a superinscription, which means that the name of Tutankhamun has been written over another name that have been erased. According to the traces that are still visible in the text, we can see that the name that was written in the text before the one of Tutankhamun is the one of Neferuaten, and therefore the female pharaoh who ruled Egypt. We don't know for sure for how long and in what specific time frame, but between the end of the reign of Akhenaten and the beginning of the reign of Tutankhamun. So it is possible that this part of the mask, the ears with the holes, is actually related to the previous owner of the mask and not to Tutankhamun. Another detail to underline is the fact that when the mask was found, those holes in the ears were actually covered by a golden sheet. And therefore, possibly it means that the ears of Tutankhamun, when Tutankhamun died, were somehow not pierced, so that the golden sheet was used to cover these holes and to make them hidden. So it is possible that while Tutankhamun was a child, he actually used earrings, but then during the passage between childhood and adulthood, he stopped to use them. We don't know for sure, of course. We know that at that time, children, both male and female children, used to wear earrings. But at a certain time, usually boys stopped using earrings. And probably that was this kind of passage between childhood and adulthood that determined them not to use the earrings anymore. However, there are important exceptions, and one example is Akhenaten, as you can see in this relief. I've decided to put this specific relief, but there are many images where Akhenaten is represented with his ears pierced. Akhenaten, in this case, is a man, not a child anymore, and his ears are still pierced. So it is possible that Tutankhamun as well continued to use earrings even when he was adult. And another object that I would like to show you, which is strictly linked to the earrings I've shown you before, is this portable chest. This portable chest that was found here in the antechamber. I've decided to add this image just to give you an idea of the place where the object was found. This portable chest is decorated with texts and some images. And in these particular images, you can see Tutankhamun while he's worshipping Osiris, in particular Onofris Osiris, so a specific form of the god Osiris. And Tutankhamun is represented with his ears pierced. And therefore, it seems that Tutankhamun at a certain time actually used earrings. The most important thing to underline about this scene is the fact that in the text on the portable chest, Tutankhamun is described as the Osiris Tutankhamun, in particular the Osiris Nebkheperure, which means that the scene is probably set in the afterlife, and that Tutankhamun was already dead in the idea of this scene. And if Tutankhamun was already dead and has his ear pierced, maybe it means that he continued to use earrings even when he was adult. So we don't know for sure if those earrings, the ones that I've shown you before, were actually employed, used by Tutankhamun, but it is highly probable. So we can try to add an element on our image, on our picture of Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun, as we saw, surrounded by the court with someone holding the flabellum, and while he is wearing these earrings. There are also other objects in the tomb of Tutankhamun that were probably used by Tutankhamun while he was alive. And this is another example. Actually, it is just an hypothesis. It is not certain that this object was actually used by Tutankhamun. But this object was found together with other tiny objects in a chest by Carter. And if you look close at the scene that I've put on the right of the slide, so this detail that belongs to the gilded wooden shrine found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, you can see that Tutankhamun is depicted with a very similar ornament like the one that Carter found in the chest. We must say that the object that Carter found is quite little, so not necessarily the same object, but the shape is exactly the same. And the object has a hole, a longitudinal hole in the upper part. And in fact, Carter thought that it was a part of possibly a mirror, something to be attached to a handle. However, we must consider the hypothesis, this theory, that this object was actually an ornament not for an object, but for a person, for Tutankhamun in particular. And the scene that I've decided to add to this slide shows Tutankhamun while he's sitting in front of his great royal wife, Ankhesenamun, and the scene, which is quite familiar, quite lovely. It recalls the scenes of the Amarna period, which, however, were only partially familiar because Ankhesenamun and Tutankhamun are represented together in a quite familiar scene, but there are plenty of images, plenty of details that underline the royal status of this couple. And the pendant that he's wearing, that Tutankhamun is wearing, is one of these elements. But thanks to this image, and possibly thanks to the object that Carter found, we can add another hint to the image of Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun wearing jewels, wearing pendants, and also wearing breastplates, such as this one. This is the object that I've mentioned before, whose shape is quite similar to the one related to the earrings. And here you can see that the bird represented is a hawk. The object is magnificent, is extremely rich, extremely colorful. And you can see that the hawk, as well as the other bird, let's say, in the earrings, is holding with its claws the hieroglyphic sign for eternity. But in this case, there's also another sign on the claws of the bird, which is the Ankh sign. There are two Ankh signs on both sides of the object. The Ankh on the right is entire. As you can see, all the pieces are present, are visible. Whereas the one on the left side is broken. You can see that a part of the Ankh is missing. And when Carter analyzed this object, he said that probably it was used by Tutankhamun because it presents traces of use, and also because of this fragment that was broken, and therefore this detail was another element that proved that the breastplate was actually used. So thanks to these various objects, we can try and picture an image of the pharaoh Tutankhamun. This object is partially related to Tutankhamun as a pharaoh, but it also tells us something more. As you can see, this is a quite simple cane, and I can show you where it was found. It was found here in the burial chamber, between the outermost and the second shrine. of the burial chamber. So a very peculiar spot, a very important area in the whole tomb. And but it is quite simple. I mean, Carter was quite astonished when he saw this object in that peculiar place, and decorated with the golden elements and with this very long inscription. He couldn't understand why an object like this, an object which is not particularly rich, was decorated with such an important metal, so with gold, and was placed in that specific spot. But then Carter wrote read the inscription, and he clearly understood why. Because this cane was picked by Tutankhamun himself, and the inscription refers to this fact. So the cane was chosen by Tutankhamun, by the king, and that's the reason why it deserves somehow the gold and this inscription and this specific spot. As you know, Tutankhamun had many health issues, as we saw before, as I've already mentioned, and he definitely needed staffs and canes to walk, because he had major issues with the back, with his feet, and therefore, in the tomb of Tutankhamun, Carter found almost 130 canes, 130 staffs. A great number, of course, staffs were used as a symbol of power, so they were used also to underline the importance of a pharaoh, the power of a pharaoh. But in this case, the number is quite high, and it is probably due to the fact that Tutankhamun actually needed a support to walk. So this cane is even more important because it helps us have another point of view on Tutankhamun. Someone who needs a support, someone who choose a cane, someone who choose the instrument that he's going to use while he is walking. And this fact always makes me think about how nowadays, even nowadays, when, for instance, when we walk into the woods and we found on the ground a branch of staff with a peculiar shape, a particular shape, we decided to use it, to pick it and to use it, and maybe to bring it back home. It made me think a very similar situation for Tutankhamun. And I think that this inscription, this object, help us have another standpoint on Tutankhamun, on his human side, which is quite similar to our. And I would like to continue on this path because in the tomb of Tutankhamun, there are also other objects that are not particularly rich, not particularly valuable from a mere economical point of view, but extremely valuable from a human point of view. We saw the cane, and in this case, I would like to focus on the lock of hair, this specific lock of hair, because in the tomb of Tutankhamun, various locks of hair has been found, but I've decided to add the image of this lock because in this case, we are able to give an identity of the owner of the lock. And in this case, the lock belongs to Queen T, so the grandmother of Tutankhamun. This lock of hair was found into the little coffin that you can see in the picture. on the coffin, there's the name of T, of Queen T. But why did an object like this, did a lock of hair, was a lock of hair placed into the tomb of Tutankhamun? The question is not that simple, and answering is quite complicated. And in fact, there are many various hypotheses on the use of these locks of hair, especially in funerary contexts. It is possible, since Queen T was the grandmother of Tutankhamun, as I said, that this lock of hair was a sort of a family heirloom. So it is possible that Queen T decided to give this lock to his grandson in order to create a sort of a strong relationship, a familiar relationship. It is also possible that hair was somehow related to youth, and therefore putting a lock of hair of someone into the tomb of a deceased was a sort of wish for the deceased to wake up in the afterlife, to go through the afterlife and be able to be young again, a sort of proper rebirth in the afterlife. And in the case of Tutankhamun, it would be even more valuable since Tutankhamun died young, and he definitely needed to arrive to the afterlife with a new strength, with a new youth. It is also possible that hair was a way to identify the identity of someone. And so it is possible that locks of hair were used as a sort of signature of some kind. For instance, it has been suggested that locks of hair were used as a sort of signature and were used in order to testify, to prove that the funerary rituals went as agreed. There are also other hypotheses that said that locks of hair of this kind, especially the ones, of course, found in funerary contexts, were somehow related to mourning and grieving. And so putting someone's hair in a tomb was a way to relate the mourning, the grieving of that person and the death of the deceased. So it was a way to underline the loss, the pain after a loss of this kind. We don't know for sure. I've also added the card with the comments of Carter on this lock. We don't know for sure, even because in this case we know the name of the person, of the owner of the lock, but in the majority of the cases of the locks of hair found in funerary context during the entire ancient Egyptian culture, during the entire ancient Egyptian chronology, we don't know the name of the person who gave that lock. And so it is also possible that in this case, the reason why Queen T or someone decided to donate that lock of hair to Tutankhamun is completely different, has a completely different purpose than all the other traces, all the other evidences concerning locks of hair in funerary contexts. However, the fact that in this case we know the name and we know that T was the grandmother of Tutankhamun possibly is related to how Tutankhamun was perceived in his family. So it is a sort of underlining the importance of the family relationship in ancient Egypt and in Tutankhamun's family in particular. I would like to continue on this path, on this family path, because there are also other objects that are probably related to the relationship between the various members of Tutankhamun's family. And in this case, the member of the family is Princess Meritaten. Meritaten was the eldest daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. She was also the sister of the great royal wife of Tutankhamun. We don't know for sure if there's any other kind of relationship or blood relationship between Meritaten and Tutankhamun. However, she was a member of Tutankhamun's family. And this ivory palette is one of the various objects originally belonging to Meritaten that were found in the tomb of Tutankhamun. This palette is quite peculiar for many different reasons, but I would like to underline the two most important ones. The first one is the inscription. The inscription, of course, refers to Meritaten, but her name, the name of Meritaten, is not written into the cartouche. The name written in the cartouche that you can see in the text is the one of Nefertiti, so Meritaten's mother. And in fact, Meritaten here is considered the daughter of the great royal wife Nefertiti. The fact that the name of Meritaten is not written into a cartouche is quite important, because it means that at that time, when the palette was created, Meritaten was a princess and not a queen, not the great royal wife of Smenkhare, the other pharaoh who ruled Egypt between the end of the reign of Akhenaten and the beginning of the reign of Tutankhamun. So we know that this object have been created when Meritaten was quite young. And we don't know how and when this object was donated from by Meritaten to Tutankhamun. The other quite important element I would like to underline is the fact that this palette is not a scribe palette, but it is an artist palette, as you can see from the quantity of different colored inks present on the palette. Usually in the scribe palettes, there are only two different kind of inks, the red one and the black one, whereas in this case, as you can see, there are many other colors. So we don't know why this object have been found in the tomb of Tutankhamun. What we know is that many objects found in the funerary equipment, in the burial equipment of Tutankhamun, originally didn't belong to Tutankhamun. But we don't know why all these objects have been found in the tomb of Tutankhamun. There are many hypotheses. It is possible that since we don't have many other tombs found intact of pharaohs, it is quite difficult to compare and contrast the results, compare and contrast the objects found in the various tombs. So it is possible that during the Amarna age, the funeral equipment of a deceased was realized by collecting and putting together various objects belonging to different members of the family of the deceased. But it is also possible that Tutankhamun died particularly young, so his funerary equipment was not ready, and they need to create ex novo a funerary equipment, a series of burial goods. And in order to do that, they decided to collect objects from various other goods belonging to members of Tutankhamun's family. So we don't know for sure why this object is there. But again, it underlines somehow this relationship between Tutankhamun and the various members of his family. So I would like to add other pieces of information to our idea of the human, of the boy Tutankhamun. So we saw him surrounded by the court, we saw him while hunting, we saw him with all the jewels, all the ornaments, and now we are seeing him as a member of his family. But we are talking about gifts. I would like also to show you another object that was a gift, but not a gift from a member of Tutankhamun's family. This is an effigy of the king, who is represented lying on a bier. It was found in this little coffin. And before looking at the whole object, I would like to show you a detail of this amazing object, where you can see that the ears of Tutankhamun are represented pierced. So just to create a link with the earrings that we saw before. This is the entire object that you can see. As you can see, this object is amazing. It's, I believe, an unicum. It's quite similar to a shabti, but it is not a shabti. Here, the king is represented mummified, wrapped, mummified, but hands and the face of the king are not wrapped. As you can see, probably Tutankhamun was holding the crooked flail, which has gone missing, and he is represented while wearing the nemes. So in this image, Tutankhamun is a sort of mixture between Osiris and Horus. So Osiris and the king while he was alive. A detail that I would like to underline is the presence of these two other statuettes next to the body of the king. These two birds, a hawk and a barbird, and together they are somehow embracing, they are protecting the body of the king with their wings. And these wings crossed on the chest of Tutankhamun create a sort of rishi decoration, but also underline the protection of these two birds for Tutankhamun. And I believe it is something really powerful and really important to underline. As I said, this object was a gift from not a member of the family of Tutankhamun, but a member of the entourage of Tutankhamun, Maya. Maya was the superintendent of the works at the necropolis. It was also a royal scribe and also a superintendent of the treasury. And Maya was also the ones who donated to the king a shabti. So again, the link between this object and shabti figures is strong, but as I said, they are two different objects. Again, here we can see Tutankhamun and we can see the objects that were donated to the king. When Carter found this series of statuettes donated by the various members of the court, the various members of the entourage of Tutankhamun, he said that he imagined Tutankhamun as a beloved king, a king that was loved by the members of his court. Of course, this is a quite romantic and a bit naive image, but I wanted to add also this element to the presentation because even if it is quite romantic and difficult to believe, but it is possible. It is possible that Carter was right and that Tutankhamun was actually particularly loved. We know that gifts were used to underline powerful relationships between various people, between the pharaoh and his court, but it is also a quite romantic view. And so I've decided to add this specific object of the various that have been found donated to the pharaoh by the members of his entourage because of the uniqueness of the object, and also because I wanted to add also this particular aspect to our new vision, our new point of view on Tutankhamun. The very last slide of this lecture is dedicated to another standpoint, another facet of Tutankhamun, of the boy, of the man Tutankhamun. We were able to picture Tutankhamun surrounded by the court, or while hunting, or with people holding the Flabelum, while Tutankhamun was wearing all these ornaments that we saw before. We saw the pharaoh Tutankhamun. We saw also Tutankhamun as a member of a community and also a member of his own family. And in this case, I would like to underline the fact that Tutankhamun was also a father, or at least he wanted to become a father, because these two bodies of the unborn daughters of Tutankhamun have been found in the treasury, in the tomb of Tutankhamun. This body had been mummified, and on the face of the child on the left, Carter found also a funerary mask. So I wanted to add this very few slide, the very last slide, sorry, just to add very few pieces of information on this other facet of Tutankhamun, of the human side of Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun was a pharaoh, definitely. Tutankhamun was a member of the court, the most important member of the court. Tutankhamun, who was a grandson, who was a member of a great family, and also Tutankhamun, who at least tried to become a father. So thank you so much. I've added just a very strict, very selected bibliography at the end. There are plenty of texts, papers, books dedicated to Tutankhamun, but I've decided to add these very few references because they are strictly related to the objects that I've shown during the lecture. Thank you very much.